But I don't know if anybody else had trouble. I tried to go to the website last night and today. It was blocked out. I couldn't get in. Now, I don't know whether I was alone or other people had it, but I got to the site about a week ago and reviewed it, but I wanted to go back in more detail last night. But a couple of things that caught my eye. First of all, that statement that Donna quoted, that mission is trumping cultural resources. That's backwards. This should be looking at military impacts to cultural resources, not cultural resources impacts to military mission. This is an EA on cultural resources. Now, a couple of things that caught my eye is one, that no religious sites have been designated at Pohakuloa as of November 2016. No religious sacred sites. That's very strange, because that whole area, Pohakuloa, means the land of the night of long prayer. And we know that there are very special places up there, all the pu'u. And again, there's the Umi Heiau over near Hualalai, that whole area, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, Hualalai, that whole heavenly realm as it's defined. And it's very interesting. It's also interesting to note that the military claims they've been bombing for 70 years, and they've surveyed less than 1/3 of the 132 or 133,000 acres. Now, what have they been doing for 70-some years other than bombing? They certainly have been put culture priorities up there on the list, you know. Now, Julie Ta'omio, who is the cultural person, has been up there since, I believe, 1995, so over 20 years. She, in a meeting that we had with her last December 19th at Pohakuloa, she said they've identified 1,200 cultural sites. 1,200. That's on, of course, the 1/3 or less than 1/3 of the base that's been surveyed. So it's certainly reasonable to believe that if they did a complete survey, there'd be several thousand cultural sites. But again, the mission is the priority. So I've been dealing with these commanders that change every 2 years up there now for over 30 years. And things are getting worse and worse in terms of stonewalling the community. And the lack, they use phrase of dialogue and listening and hearing one another, but it's been getting worse and worse. I think certainly Trump contributes to a climate of this kind of thing too, but it's the military themselves. When I look back over all these different commanders now, the best one that we ever had was a woman, an African-American woman commander. Her name was Warlene Richardson. And she really attempted some kind of dialogue with the community. Maybe it's because of her background. But she even brought her boss, the garrison commander for all of Hawaii, to Maluaina. I remember it on Veterans Day. It would have been about 2010. And we had a meeting. There were about 20 or 30 of us there, mostly Kanaka Maoli. And one of the people brought up the resolution that called for stopping all live fire and cleanup of depleted uranium. And the commander, the colonel, the full colonel from Oahu, he kind of backhanded that comment and said, it's only a resolution. And one of the Kanaka Maoli said, you know, the Newlands resolution that supposedly annexed Hawaii, it was only a resolution. You know, and that's when the commander pounded the table and said, stopping live fire is not going to happen. So it was very clear that, in his judgment, the voice of the county council or the state or anybody else is subservient to the military. You know, I want to mention one other thing that Shelley brought to our attention that I actually forgot about. Hawaii had a constitutional convention in 1978. And I was on Oahu teaching school over there. And I brought up, and we tried to get an outright ban on nuclear power plants for Hawaii and also nuclear waste being disposed of in Hawaii. And we couldn't get an outright ban. I remember Jerry Harris, who was the mayor of Honolulu later on, he was in that con and powerful permission. I was just a citizen raising concerns. But what we did get out of that, it's written into the state constitution, that before nuclear waste could be disposed of in Hawaii, or a nuclear power plant, a commercial plant could be built, it would require 2/3 vote of both houses of the legislature. Now, the military at Pohakuloa has a license to allow the depleted uranium to remain in place. Now, if you have a license to allow garbage to remain in place, that's my definition of a dump. So if you're allowing the DU to remain in place and not cleaned up, it's violating the state constitution. But again, besides that DU resolution we got passed about stopping live fire and this state constitution thing, Hawaii County, you know, was the first municipality in the entire United States to pass a law declaring itself a nuclear-free zone, 1981. And for 3 years, we politely asked the Navy to stop bringing in its nuclear ships. We didn't know about the DU at Pohakuloa at that time, and they refused. And then we finally said we're going to have a swimming blockade of the warships. And the day before the ship arrived, Steve Yamashiro, who was the county council chair at the time, passed emergency legislation that I'm sure violated the Sunshine Law requirements of hearing, 6 days notice on hearings. And they put an amendment on that nuclear-free law to exempt the military. So it's like having a no-smoking law and exempt smokers. So we went forward to uphold the nuclear-free law. We entered the water and protested the warship coming in, and I was given 3 years in prison for that. But I don't want to go into details. I only spent a year, thank goodness, was kicked out because of international protests. But 2 years later, that was '84, 2 years later, we got on the ballot an effort to repeal the amendment to exempt the military. And apparently, the Chambers of Commerce and Steve Yamashiro, who was running for mayor at the time, they knew we were going to win and take the amendment away, restore the nuclear-free law. And Yamashiro dumped in thousands of dollars from his mayoral campaign into this partisan ballot issue, and we lost by less than 0.5%. And the courts declared that him putting mayoral campaign funds into a partisan issue was illegal, but the deed was done. So, I mean, this is a little history of efforts to deal with nuclear efforts in Hawaii. I just wanted to give you. But let me just emphasize a few other points out of this, this particular thing on Pohakuloa. And again, I think I said Marquez, he's a personable person, but in terms of his dealing with us, he stiffed us on so many occasions of opening up public access to have a ceremony at Pu'ukapele, an ahu that was built 10 or 15 years ago by Royal Order and other people, to give us the same kind of access there that they give to the Chamber of Commerce. See where the drone field, there's a special drone field up there. And again, one thing that's totally absent in this EA, and that's why I think we need to call for a full EIS, because to understand impacts to cultural resources, you have to know the impacts that are taking place up there. Now, they've been bombing for 70 years, and the last figure that we had was during the Stryker EIS, they said that 14.8 million live rounds a year are fired up there. Everything from small arms up to heavy bombing. And one thing I think very few people are aware of here, that B-52, B-1, and B-2 bombers from Missouri, from Louisiana, from Guam, fly nonstop, bomb at Pohakuloa, sometimes from up 30,000 feet, never touch down, refuel in the air, and go back to their places, Missouri, Louisiana, and Guam. Now, we have to know how many live rounds a year are taking place up there? What kind of weapons are being fired up there? Are there other DU weapons that have been fired besides the Davy Crockett? That's the one they acknowledge, because they were caught with that one. So I would urge everybody, and we need to press them on facts and figures. What are your impacts so that we can really assess impacts to cultural resources? So the fact sheet I put on the table there of Pohakuloa is just 11 points about some of the things, but we need to, as citizens, demand answers to questions that the citizens have. I've been asking questions of commanders up there now for decades, even did formal Freedom of Information Act requests that they refused to answer. Now, something's very, very wrong in this process, you know. So we shouldn't tolerate an environmental assessment that says, as Donna quoted, and I want to read it again, the general objectives are to eliminate impacts to the military missions arising from cultural resources. Should be the other way around. You know, that's the key issue for me. So a full environmental impact, and I would say we push what the county council called for back in 2008, stop all live fire, clean up your mess, and develop an exit plan. We want to see an exit plan for PTA, not more bombing. Thanks a lot.